In the Brazil sprint, 28-year-old Carlos Sainz, a Spanish racing driver in Formula One, overtook 25-year-old Max Verstappen, a Belgian-Dutch racing driver. What explanation did Sainz provide to the overtake? In the Brazilian Grand Prix, Ferrari decided not to swap the positions of Sainz and Leclerc, a scenario that was endorsed earlier that day. What reasons did Ferrari provide for this? Watch this video to the end for answers to these questions. Max Verstappen suffers following his accident with Carlos Sainz, and George Russell prevails. Max Verstappen, the reigning world champion, limped to fourth following a collision with Carlos Sainz, but George Russell won an exciting sprint to head a Mercedes front row lockout for Sunday's Sao Paulo Grand Prix. As the Haas quickly regressed, Verstappen quickly reclaimed the lead from the startling pole sitter Kevin Magnussen, but Russell, who started third for Mercedes, had too much speed for the Red Bull and fought his way into the lead on lap 15 before coasting to his first career victory. After being passed by Carlos Sainz for second place, Verstappen, one of only two cars that didn't start the race on soft tires, experienced damage, which allowed Lewis Hamilton to easily pass the Dutchman and grab third place a lap later. Mercedes secured the top row for Sunday's race, giving the team a great chance to score its first victory of the year, while Sainz faces a 5-place grid penalty for switching engines this weekend. The confirmation of Hamilton's position on the front row came after a delay caused by the investigation into a grid violation that occurred at the start and included his position in his grid box. Hamilton, a 7-time world champion, was finally found not guilty of any wrongdoing. In 5th place, Sergio Perez finished behind his Red Bull teammate Verstappen, and Charles Leclerc, who's currently in 2nd place in the driver's standings, finished one position further back in 6th. Lando Norris, who began in 4th place, overcame his illness to place 7th, and pole sitter Kevin Magnussen earned the final point available by coming in 8th. The 24-lap race is won by Russell, who receives 8 points. The top 8 finishers receive 1 point less every position. Carlos Sainz stated that they achieved the best outcome for the squad. At the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, when he earned his 8th podium position in the 2022 FIA Formula One World Championship, Carlos Sainz lauded his Scuderia Ferrari team for achieving the finest possible outcome. Despite finishing in 2nd place in the sprint, Sainz would start the Grand Prix from the 4th row of the grid in 7th when a replacement engine was taken for his F175. On lap 7, after Charles Leclerc collided with Lando Norris, Sainz benefited from the Monegasque driver's misfortune by moving up into the top 4. A lap later, the Ferrari driver passed his former teammate into turn 1, moving up into the podium position. While he was giving his last remarks, Sainz promptly switched his attention from the weekend's events to the season finale in Abu Dhabi, where he hopes the team can build on a successful weekend in Brazil to finish the year on a positive note. He said that they were quick throughout the entire race and were able to maintain their focus. That day, they responded to every challenge, and the boys performed excellent pit stops. They achieved the best outcome for the team, and they're eager to compete once again in Abu Dhabi for the season's last race. He concluded by saying that George deserves congratulations on his first victory. The sprint in Sao Paulo was full of excitement. The breathtaking sight that occurred on Saturday in Brazil was exactly what Formula One's governing body had in mind when it introduced sprint races last season. The fantastic race, which featured non-stop action for all 24 laps, emphasized the significance of holding sprint races on tracks that permit overtaking. Magnussen surprised everyone by taking the pole for Haas in Friday's rainy qualifying, with Hamilton, Perez, and Leclerc starting from the middle of the grid. Before the race had started, it was discovered that Verstappen and Nicholas Latifi of Williams were the only drivers who did not start on soft tires. Red Bull would later clarify that the decision to save 2 sets of brand new soft tires for Sunday was made, but the move clearly backfired in the immediate. Russell put pressure on Verstappen right away at the start, and even though the Dutchman was able to fend off Mercedes before passing Magnussen, he was unable to escape DRS's range. Russell persisted in applying pressure, nearly overtook Verstappen twice, and finally succeeded on his 3rd attempt. Verstappen was caught up in Sainz's pursuit, while Sainz was being pursued by Hamilton, as the Mercedes relaxed into the distance. It was unclear whether the world champion was losing further speed as a result of running over some track debris. Verstappen made a valiant effort to fend off Sainz, but was overtaken by the Spaniard into the first curve, where the two collided. Earlier in the week, Verstappen had called sprints not exciting, owing to a lack of risk-taking and activity. Verstappen, whose front wing appeared to be damaged, saw rival Hamilton go past him on the following lap, and may have dropped even deeper had it not been for his Red Bull teammate Perez, who was standing behind him. What reasons did Ferrari give for not swapping Leclerc and Sainz? As the laps ticked off till the checkered flag at Interlagos, Sainz was running in third with teammate Leclerc following closely behind on the road. Leclerc got on the team radio to ask that the team move positions so that he could receive more points because he was aiming for a second-place finish in the F1 Drivers' Championship this year. The morning strategy briefing had considered and authorized this scenario, but in the end, Ferrari decided against carrying it out. Leclerc afterwards admitted that he was disappointed because Sainz maintained his lead until the very end. Leclerc responded when asked about the situation by motorsport.com. He said that he kind of understands that clearly Carlos is on the podium, but he typically doesn't ever ask this type of stuff. He said that they talked about that situation before the race, thus that's why he did it. And then, in the heat of the moment, they decided differently for whatever reason. Although very frustrating, that's how things are. Ferrari has disclosed, however, that there were actually two issues at hand. Thus, the company decided against interfering with the track positions and forcing Sainz to reposition himself behind Leclerc. The first was the possibility that Sainz would violate the safety car rule and get a 5-second time penalty because of the uncertainty surrounding Yuki Tsunoda's track position. The second was that Max Verstappen and Fernando Alonso were both closely pursuing Leclerc. This meant that, should he receive a penalty or time the Leclerc pass incorrectly, Sainz ran the very real possibility of losing more positions. In the fight for the Constructors' Championship, this may have been expensive. Team owner Mattia Binotto commented on the circumstance, saying that swapping the two cars on the last straight was obviously challenging because Charles had Fernando and Max right behind him, so it would have undoubtedly been challenging and potentially hazardous. Binotto continued by saying that more than that, they were aware that they were being looked into for what transpired with Tsunoda behind the safety car. They were, shall we say, fairly comfortable at the moment since race control had cleared them, but it would have been risky to continue without a resolution because, for example, Carlos would have lost more than one position if there had been a 5-second penalty. So, it was definitely wiser to continue with the positions and the gaps on the circuit for the Constructors' title. With just the last race in Abu Dhabi, Ferrari is only 19 points ahead of Mercedes in the Constructors' title. Leclerc and Sergio Perez are tied for second place in the drivers' standings with 290 points, but Perez missed the chance to pull ahead when teammate Max Verstappen declined to step aside for him on the last lap in Brazil. What explanation did Carlos Sainz give for overtaking Max Verstappen? After finishing in second place in the Brazil sprint, Carlos Sainz shared some details about his race with Max Verstappen. Carlos Sainz battled his way into the top three after starting the sprint in fifth place by overtaking Lando Norris and Kevin Magnussen. With 5 circuits left, Sainz, who was running on soft tires, was able to overtake Max Verstappen of Red Bull, who was running on mediums, to take second position. Sainz's vehicle collided with the Red Bull driver's front wing during the overtaking at turn 1, damaging the Dutchman's vehicle. Sainz said that he was able to make all the starting positions for the first few laps, joining the fight with Max and George. Sainz said that ultimately, he believed second place was the maximum that day, as he had to be aggressive because he would undoubtedly receive the penalty tomorrow. He then said that Red Bulls are so speedy on the straight that one has to either brake hard to pass them or don't pass them at all. He then apologized if he caused a little bit of touch, and said that racing requires that occasionally one takes a risk in order to make a move stick. Congratulations to the winners of the Sao Paulo Grand Prix Sprint. It was really an interesting race. Do you think the reasons Ferrari gave are sensible? What other events do you want us to feature? Let us know in the comments section. Thank you for watching, and please give us a thumbs up and subscribe.